following is a 30-minute extract of a video a little under an hour posted on the Patreon page initially on October 23rd, 2024 regarding copyleft, private marriage certificates, private birth records, and certain keys when it comes to express trust. Hope you enjoy. The matter of copyleft and an express trust is the same as someone who intends to wash their hands. You have the soap on it, but in order for you to clean that hand of yours, friction needs to exist by the use of one hand with the other. Copyleft is the right hand. Express trust constitution is the left. That soap that you're using as the agent to make it work are the mediums that everyone already know of, such as certified copy, the issue of public records, and the rule of evidence. This analogy has been provided in the past for you to comprehend that one cannot fix itself without the other. Copyleft is what highlights the interests of property, particularly regardless of whether you are restricting that property use privately or you are engaged in an activity that you intend to benefit from through something that's already been used publicly. The use of copyleft and express trust constitution is no different than the circumstance of the right hand and the left hand when you want to wash your hands. It becomes easier when both of them rub against one another to clean themselves, whether it be the palm or the back of the hand. If you somehow just use that one hand of yours and you somehow manage to have the soap on it, and you create the friction by the same hand. Now the question is, how do you clean the back of that same hand? You require the other hand to do so. And the way that you will clean one hand by itself without using another hand to create the friction would not be as effective had you used the other hand. That's the principles of how notary witnesses work. They do not certify the truth. The reason why some CPNs cannot get certain credit cards is because they don't have the right to access it. Every time they issue a credit card or a debit card, whatever it is, or a loan, they are using it for them to give you the crumbs of whatever amount that you think the credit limit is. But when you have a CPN, they cannot use it. A copyleft is what is presented for them to use it under a restricted condition so that you can get that credit limit. If it's not held by the trust and the trust terms and conditions are not copyrighted and liened also, they can still pierce it. There's a proper avenue whereby the tortfeasors or any representatives of any county, state, or federal level are compelled to acknowledge it based on functional rule of trust and contract, maxim, national and international law. Beautiful people, welcome back. Copyleft. If you've yet to watch this video, go watch it first. If you've yet to watch any video regarding copyright, go watch them first. If you've yet to watch the video on the website regarding step-by-step copyright, I implore you, go watch it. Of course, the Trust 101 videos, because everything we're about to speak of relates to all that. And also, the video on the database injunction. You see how every one of those come together. I don't know whether I'll be uploading this video first, before the video on the individual master file, or after. Whatever the case may be, know that it all joins together. Because when you start sending certain things to the IRS, copyleft will be one of the reasons why, or shall I say lack thereof, aka your copyright interest, be the reason why IRS will back the fuck off. One thing a lot of people don't consider in the use of Thatens Legis is who has the copyright interest to it. The reason why you would be copyrighting certain things regarding that is legas and other entities that you'll be building business credit and doing business with is so that certain entities cannot intertwine by creating assumptions that are conclusory, meaning it's unfounded on evidence that you're liable for certain things. Therefore, they can come to you as though they're your God. And in doing all that, you must comprehend the principles and concept behind copyleft. Copyleft encompasses the types, so it's plural. Right off the bat, it's letting you know there are different types of copyleft. Copyleft encompasses, meaning it's a summary or just a general term relating to different things. Copyright encompasses the types of licenses with which an author releases some of his or her rights. So copyleft is the release of some rights regarding some authorship. Now let's pause. When you see this word author, it refers to someone with an interest relating to something they've written, a body of work written down. Again, if you've watched the individual master file video, whether before or after this, or if you attend the 10th Tier 4 meeting that took place, I believe was on the 25th of September 2024. And if you will be attending the webinar regarding how to stay private with your family and things like that, you'll realize that the express trust must have its own constitution. Trust minutes are a form of amendment or a form of continuation. No different than you will have a UCC and you do an amendment or continuation, or the United States amend the Constitution by Amendment 11 all the way to whatever number they have now, or the state constitution amend their constitutions and then they label it the year that they've amended it. But quite often not to the benefit of the people, to the detriment of the people. But in your case, since you're handling your trust affairs privately, it inevitably will be beneficial. So the authorship being spoken of here, believe it or not, is the constitution to your express trust. And guess what? Constitution just means makeup of something. The makeup of how you run all properties, interests, effect, and persons involved relating to that express trust, whether it be the grantor, trustee, trust protector, or beneficiary, foreign or domestic. That authorship is the language stipulating the interest and the ownership, which goes all the way to the description that you put down in the copyright. I hope you follow in what I'm saying here. And then that constitution of your express trust also would be copyrighted. And all that description of the copyright that you put down, when you copyright that name of that as legas, would describe the interest that you have in it. That interest you have in it is the how and why. The what itself is ins legas. Granted, you can do it with any other entities, but in this case, we'll focus and particularize things on that ins legas because that's the issue 99% of people face and will be facing long after you and I are gone. The system is designed to be that way because 99% of people are oil on the wheel of slavery, and that system of fuckery would never end. So it's best that you know it. The authorship being referred to here when it comes to any type of interest in property, whether it be copyright or copyleft, in this case, copyleft, is the how and why described when you copyrighted that as legas or the Constitution to your express trust. And by the way, you should copyright the Constitution and bylaw to your 508 also, just as a side note. And within your Constitution, which I've yet to release on the website because I want to get to this point. If you've ever noticed some of those video thumbnails showed at the beginning, they were made 2022, 2023. All this were in mind to get to this point. But without those introductory phases of things, introducing things like this back then would have just sounded good and you would not really know what to do with it or why. Now we're getting to that point. So you would copyright the Constitution to your express trust, which I've yet to release, but I will subsequent to this video and some other videos that I anticipate to release relating to things of this nature. because those would be crucial, such as the one with the individual master file and the webinar relating to how to keep your family private and a step-by-step of how to do everything. See, everyone really knows about, okay, baptismal certificate, or you can create a common law marriage, blah, 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 blah. Good. See, all that is very common. It's not new. But the part people, even those who speak of so-called special information of this nature, the part they don't know or will not tell you is that your express trust is supposed to hold all those instruments. And once they hold it, you copyright it. And the stipulation to why you're doing that marriage certificate privately and that private birth record and why you're doing certain things building credit privately without using the social security number of that child or yours will be based on the stipulation of your express trust constitution, which holds all those other things. Remember, contract and trust law. The contract makes the law. That's how it cannot be challenged. I have seen people who made their own marriage certificates and then did certain things when it comes to baptismal certificate. Yes, that's cute and all, but it was challenged and they failed at it. But I don't want to be the Debbie Downer by showing the case law to that. I do that ever too often. But let's just focus on the solution. So I'm letting you know, very much like the concept people have when it says unrebutted affidavit is truth in commerce, where I show that on YouTube. And then I show what the qualification of an affidavit is and the particular condition as to why that is so. Well, the same misnomer shown in that video before the solution shown when it comes to the clarity, it's the same misnomer many people have when it comes to creating your own marriage certificate, creating your own birth certificate, aka baptismal certificate. Sure, those concepts exist, but something makes those concepts qualify for being able to exist in said jurisdiction. That qualification that allows you to use it that certain way is the key. Merely creating the birth certificate privately, aka baptismal, or a family Bible, or merely creating a common law marriage certificate, that is not enough, because once shit goes down and property interest and personhood comes in the face, those that many are trying to avoid by doing those birth certificate privately, family Bible, baptismal certificate, marriage certificate, those that are trying to avoid by doing that would ignore it. And here's the catch. You merely authenticating it on a federal level is not sufficient. Because remember, authentication is not really the document you're authenticating. You're authenticating the signature of the notary, who is an officer of the state. And you're going to another entity to show that, hey, an officer of the state signed and witnessed this. Is this officer of the state on your end? Are they legitimate? It's the signature of that notary that you are authenticating, not the content of your document. That's another part that's missing. So this is not saying something is wrong when someone tells you authenticate your birth certificate that you've created privately or your marriage certificate. What I'm telling you is the concept behind authentication is the signature, because someone else has witnessed as a self-confession that, hey, I witnessed this. And their buddies are saying, yep, the one who witnessed this is legitimate because they're part of us. But the content of it itself is not what's being witnessed. That's the principles of how notary witnesses work. They do not certify the truth unless you do it the way that I tell you when it comes to the true and correct copy, which you must also have that as a form. So when people just say have those certificates, that's the principles of how notary witnesses work. They do not certify the truth unless you do it the way that I tell you when it comes to the true and correct copy, which you must also have that as a form. So when people just say have those certificates notarized and then authenticated and you're good to go, no, it's not just that you're authenticating. You have to create a certificate of true and correct copy where the notary says that this thing is true and correct and I certify it, rather than just a regular jurat. See, there are different tools to how a notary is used. See, there are different tools to how a notary is used. See, there are different tools to how a notary is used. Most people authenticate a regular jurat where they say, oh, standing before me is a man or a woman to which they've identified themselves through some ID, and then they go authenticate that because that is the jurat attached to that marriage or birth certificate. If that's challenged, they will look at the form of witness and they would throw it to the side because that's a different type of evidence rule that you're dealing with. What you need is a true and correct copy where the notary certifies that, yes, I've seen all this and it is true. And the verbiage under that true and correct copy is what you attach to those certificates, birth and marriage and whatever else. And then you authenticate that. But that is ultimately still not the key. The key is who holds that certificate. The key is who holds all the Constitution that delineated why their certificate exists. I hope you're really listening to what I'm saying here. If not, slow the video down in a setting or rewind it. The key as to why that authenticated marriage and birth certificate that you're doing privately is the holder of it. They must have a body of contract and trust law that pre-exists that says they can do that. Then that body of contract called the Constitution of that express trust. Remember, the express trust holds and will be holding that birth and marriage certificate. Within a trust minute. But the Constitution itself should and must be copyrighted. When you copyright that, you then take that, put a lien on it, that same Constitution, and then authenticate that. That is the key to that marriage and birth certificate that you're authenticating. Once more, many know about creating a marriage and birth certificate. Like I always say, they only are given the half information. I've just summarized about 30% extra, which gets you 80% of the way. Now let's explain a little bit of what's left within the 20%, or at least some of the 20%. Copyleft. Now we're back here. We had to go over there in that detour for you to comprehend the purpose of why we're reading this. Remember, the why and how are the key. And once the sequence of events as to what I'm saying are released in videos and webinars, I will now release the documents that I'm referring to. All the documents I just mentioned, I'll release it on the website. Copyleft encompasses the types of licenses. And see this types of licenses for those using that birth certificate in the advanced manner. So we just spoken about one sphere of you handling things without involving anyone controlling your stuff in any way. But if the birth certificate is already in place and the Social Security has been used like most people have already fell into, now the only thing left is the control of that also, because your equity and your life is attached to it. And that name is what is required to attach to you for them to validate it. And they use it per contractual basis to monetize things through your consent or signature or authorization, one way or another. Therefore, when you're beginning to do that in an advanced manner, this also attaches to something called a private placement memorandum. So when I'm speaking of this copyleft, it is all encompassing. Copyleft encompasses the types of licenses. For those of you who have the PPM, you will see that it speaks of licensing. Right. When I tell you certain third parties, when you do certain things, will come to you to rent that, and they'll give you cash flow based on whatever method you want to use. If you're using insurance in some ways, it's called something else. If, regardless of whether you use insurance one way or the other, whether you use the public market or not, that is done through licensing. See, the reason why I say a step at a time, certain things missing that even when you have the PPM, still requires as a glue. This is one of it. So listen carefully. And even if you're not doing the PPM, it still attaches and applies to you. given the earlier things that I've explained as to how certain certificates can be done privately. And even if you're not doing the PPM, it still attaches and applies to you, given the earlier things that I've explained as to how certain certificates can be done privately to handle your own private affairs. Copyleft encompasses the types of licenses with which an author, I think you comprehend what I mean now by author, because I've just taken a few minutes to explain it, releases some of his or her rights. Remember, those rights when it comes to those marriage and birth certificates you created privately is encompassed and explained within your express trust constitution, which the constitution itself was copyrighted. And those rights are enumerated within your express trust constitution that allows you to do such a thing based on private law, which when you create those certificates subsequently, marriage or birth, whatever else it is, for business purposes, which there are, now there's a trust that no one else can actually pierce. If it's not held by the trust and the trust terms and conditions are not copyrighted and liened also, they can still pierce it. If it's not held by the trust and the trust terms and conditions are not copyrighted and liened also, they can still pierce it. Because when it comes to marriage and birth certificate, certain things like court test and control test has certain loopholes whereby they don't even have to use that. But when it comes to other affairs, then court test and control test of the foreign trustee and proxy comes in place. But when you're creating your own private instrument that way, because when it comes to marriage and birth certificate, they can just ignore it and say, we don't have to acknowledge it. So the matter of court test and control test is not even this situation at all. Because what will the foreign trustee do when it comes to the birth certificate of your child? What will the foreign trustee do when it comes to your union between your wife? They're not in that situation at all. It's your private affairs, as private as it gets. Therefore, there's a proper avenue whereby the tortfeasors or any representatives of an county, state, or federal level are compelled to acknowledge it based on functional rule of trust and contract, maxim, national, and international law. There's a proper avenue whereby the tortfeasors or any representatives of an county, state, or federal level are compelled to acknowledge it based on functional rule of trust and contract, maxim, national, and international law. That's why I told you go watch those earlier video thumbnails. That way what I'm saying here could be added together as a whole and make sense. If you've yet to watch it, all these just simply sound good to the ears. And if you've watched any of my videos, you would know that I'm not a big fan of that at all. Some of you who are aware of it, this might be repetitive, but I will not expect that. There are not new people watching these videos. So I'm constantly giving these caveats. Go watch those other videos for this to make sense. We're not here just to engage in feel-good talk. This is your life. You have to comprehend it. This is what people do when they go, quote-unquote, ghost. It's not that they're going, quote-unquote, ghost. It's just that the other party has no choice but to not touch them. With technology in today's world, it's impossible to go ghost. It's impossible to live off the grid. But what you can do is properly separate jurisdiction. But just throwing that buzz phrase out there, separation of jurisdiction, separation of power means nothing if you don't know how trust and contract law works. Which, believe it or not, I've just given you most of the key. Most of those keys, people only have about half of it. Copyleft Copyleft encompasses the types of licenses with which an author releases some of his or her rights, such as, for example, as the right to make copies of the work for profit. For profit. So those using the PPM, that's what it applies to. Or not for profit. Those who are not using the PPM and just want to go in the first dichotomy of things when it comes to marriage and birth certificate and handling your private family affairs. There you go. So when it comes to things of this nature, people tend to be single-minded. The whole, oh, well, information is supposed to be free. If you're looking for freedom, you're not supposed to be making money off of it. There's no such thing as a birth certificate. Sure, all those are right. If you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Here's another thing that I've yet to mention until this point. Before I even started making any of these videos, some of the things that I knew, did you know I used to go into some groups and I would just give the information out for free? And I would just give it out and give it out and give it out. So I realized people don't realize the worth of it. And then even as of recent, I'm realizing people still don't. Until you put a lot of price on it, then people start paying attention. Those same people talking crap, they start paying attention. It's as though people are just conditioned to just be serfs, even though it's just an option. Nonetheless, I'll keep showing and I'll keep telling it to you, but from a pragmatic perspective. Copyleft encompasses the types of licenses with which an author releases some of his or her rights, such, for example, as the right to make copies of the work for profit or not for profit. So, if you have a thing whereby you're not using a social security number to build credit, and you have business and quote unquote personal credit on point, at some point, you will get some entities tell you, well, we need to verify that this 9-digit you gave us is issued by the Social Security Administration. Or they want to tell you, hey, upload some documents. Do you know what you would do? It's called a copyleft. That's one of the documents you'll upload. Some of them will tell you, well, show us a picture of your driver's license and all that. A copyleft is what goes with it. Because what they're really telling you is, look, this thing is not issued by an entity that can tax you. Because once you get this credit, we will not have to put it into your track record so that all these other federal agencies can see it. That way it's considered in your taxability. But we can't tax this entity because it has no origin in federal agencies and any type of public law in their end that binds it, or any type of Internal Revenue Service procedures, which is codified in 26 USC, that qualify for tax assessments. We can't do anything with it. The copyleft will give them certain abilities to do certain things, yet restrict them. Because nonetheless, they can monetize that 9-digit and make monies with it and then give you what you need. That's if you're trying to build credit. Anyway, it continues to say, it is a legal practice that allows the free distribution of copies and modified versions of a work. Part of that work could be part of the right. Claiming that the rights are respected in the different versions. Then other people can use certain things in a certain way. The reason why some CPNs cannot get certain credit cards is because they don't have the right to access it. Every time they issue a credit card or a debit card, whatever it is, or a loan, they are using it for them to give you the crumbs of whatever amount that you think the credit limit is. But when you have a CPN, they cannot use it. A copyleft is what is presented for them to use it under a restricted condition so that you can get that credit limit. The reason why some CPNs cannot get certain credit cards is because they don't have the right to access it. Every time they issue a credit card or a debit card, whatever it is, or a loan, they are using it for them to give you the crumbs of whatever amount that you think the credit limit is. But when you have a CPN, they cannot use it. A copyleft is what is presented for them to use it under a restricted condition so that you can get that credit limit. Of course, when it comes to the ppm, similar concept applies, but a more advanced level, and of course with more numbers involved. And I don't want to go into the numbers. We don't want to get distracted with the numbers involved. Hey, I'm inviting you to come join the patron page. Not only do you get access to documents, posts, and videos that you will never find on any other platforms, you also get instant access to webinars that otherwise will cost far more. And we speak of things that usually we would not be able to speak of on any other platforms far more freely. On top of that, you get the opportunity to send me monthly questions along with everyone else's questions, so you can see other people going through similar circumstances. You never know. What you think might be a stupid question is quite often very valid. On top of that, you get access to monthly question and answer archives from several years back from people who have gone through it and people who are going through it. Get information regarding things you experience daily that you didn't even know you could take advantage of when it comes to business, work, or other personal things. There's a community of people where you can bounce information off of, and they can give you some tips and tricks based on what they're currently going through in their respective venues that you might maybe want to link up with. And there's a high likelihood you're not going to find them anywhere else. And you also get the access to directly send me messages. Oh, and also if you are a tier 4 member, you get access to yet another monthly meeting where we actually answer as much questions as we can, and we're between an hour and a half, and in some cases up to 4 hours. In addition to that, we also show some exclusive lessons that are not going to be posted on Patreon or anywhere else but the tier 4 meeting alone. So come forth, come join the 500 plus people already on Patreon. And in some cases, we even give certain things out. And while you're at it, you might want to check out the store, subtlesubstanceservices.com. There might be a few things you want to pick up in there.